Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for A Matter of Honor, which is episode 8 of season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my latest user poll for The Next Generation is the second season episode, A Matter of Honor. So A Matter of Honor is the episode where Riker decides to go on a Klingon ship as part of an exchange program where he has struggles to fit into their culture and then has more difficulty when the captain believes that the Enterprise has established their ship and plans on destroying the Enterprise in response, and Riker can't talk him out of it, so he tricks the captain by relieving him of duty by beaming him aboard the Enterprise so he can take over and act all tough like a Klingon but still come to agreement with the Enterprise, and the Enterprise helps Klingon ship repair, and then Riker returns back to the Enterprise. So, this episode's okay. Like, I think it's maybe a tinge overrated, because people say that this is one of the better episodes of season 2, or a lot of people do anyway, and season 2 is a bad season, and this is a decent episode, so I can see why. Like, I would definitely say that this episode does not contribute to the horribleness of season 2. But that being said, I think the horribleness of season 2 rubs off on this episode, and this episode isn't immune to it. So I wouldn't necessarily call it one of the better episodes of season 2. But it's definitely not one of the worst. Now, I think this episode is probably one of the first episodes, in my opinion anyway. It's the one that really cements and establishes the Klingon culture. Now, those, of course, who grew up and more aware of Star Trek and Klingons, after Next Generation came out or while it was coming out, are very used to what is commonly known as Klingon culture, because Klingons are probably the most, even more so than Vulcans, the most established alien race in Star Trek as far as exactly, how their culture is, a lot of specifics about their culture, such as, Kalis and Tovacor and stuff like that. And even a whole bunch of people knows how to freaking speak Klingon, for fuck's sake. So I think it's fair to say that Klingons are the most established alien race in Star Trek, in the Star Trek franchise. They're the most firm, they have the most culture establishment and all specifics, yada yada. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, the writers themselves were very sort of confused on what the Klingons were, and it did not stay consistent, particularly during the original series, which is something I know when I'm doing my reviews, when I'm rewatching the entirety of the original series, is that the portrayal of the Klingons, and even the pronunciation of the word Klingon, does not stay consistent. Some people say Klingons and Klingons, or Klingons. That's my favorite. And of course the portrayal is completely different. And the first episode, Aaron to Mercy, they're more like, they were based off of Mongolians, like Genghis Khan stereotype type thing, where they're conquering. And then in the next episode, they're more like conniving, slimy used car salesman. And then another episode, I think they're more like Ferengi. And then another episode, oh my dear Captain Kirk. So the original series was very inconsistent. And then you have, but that's season 2, and I talk about that in my coverage of season 2, because it's mainly season 2 of the original series that completely inconsistent. Season 3, you have Day of the Dove, which is more like, it's probably the prototype of what the Klingon culture would eventually become to be established as, where they're more sort of honor-based. It was more based off of Eastern cultures, which again makes it kind of similar to the Errand of Mercy portrayal. And then you got the movies, which really started to cement them more. It cemented, first of all, the movies is what established the ridges, the makeup, where of course they just looked like people doing Asian face. White people doing Asian face. Sorry to say, that's what it looked like in the original series. But in the movies, they made it more of the ridges makeup that is more known for. And then you had, of course, The Search for Spock, Star Trek 3, which really established more of the culture itself, because their appearance in the motion picture is what first established the ridges appearance, but they barely appeared in that. And of course they were seen as kind of, feel more like what we think of Klingons now, speaking Klingon and going and being all warlike. But Star Trek 3 helped to establish that even further. But even then in Star Trek 3 they were still a bit more sort of conniving, I would say, and less honorable. But they resemble a lot more, probably, than any previous entry of what we think of as modern Klingons. And then, of course, Star Trek 6 did not come out until after season 5, during the season 5 of Next Generation. So after Star Trek 3, we got like their brief appearance in Star Trek 4, which they didn't appear much, and it was this ambassador saying, "I demand justice!" And that wasn't really much, didn't do much to establish the Klingon sort of appearing. And so the next one we really got was in the first season of Next Generation, Heart of Glory, which also sort of helped sort of draw what the Klingons would eventually be like. And it's very, very close to what we now think of as Klingons. Like, we can go back and watch that episode, and they don't seem very un-Klingon-like. It's a little different, a little off, but not as bad as, "Oh, my dear Captain Kirk." But this episode is the next one we got after Heart of Glory. And of course you had all the various Worf appearances throughout the first 2 seasons of TNG that also sort of help cement what Klingons are like. But this episode really is what really jumped and dove into the specific culture. Now, I do believe Gach was mentioned before this episode, but this is the first mention of blood wine. Not a very original name, if you ask me. And it establishes a lot of specifics, like, you know, the way the structure of the Klingon ship works, the way that the first officer would kill the captain and become the captain if he feels the captain is acting cowardly or dishonorable. And it establishes this kind of that, like, sort of killing people is a lot more commonplace, and that is something that is a lot more established in Trek lore. And so, yeah, and of course, as we get after this episode, there's episodes, of course, that mostly written by Ronald D. Moore that establish even further, like, cement what Klingons are like the whole Sense of the Father, Redemption, Reunion, and then Deep Space Nine furthers even further, where we get whole episodes with Worf going off a Klingon ship, like Soldiers of the Empire, and the one with Core, or whatever that's called, On to the Breach, or whatever. But those are sort of, by that time, that the Klingon culture had already been established. It's just diving deeper, where here, I think this is the first episode that really establishes it. Now, you could say Aaron DeMercy, Day of the Dove, Star Trek 3, and what was that first season one I just mentioned? What's something? Heart of Glory, sorry. Brain farting. Heart of Glory. Those are the ones that, you know, were helping to establish Klingon culture, and they did help push it along and did push it more to what we think of now as the modern Klingon culture. But this is the episode I think really cemented that. And as I said, in all those previous ones, that they just seemed, they're very Klingon-like, but just off by like a little bit, where here they fully seem like Klingons, except for the fact that the captain's a complete moron. But I'll get into, that's just the season 2 thing, but I'll get more into that later. So you do have to appreciate it for that, and I do appreciate it for that, and I appreciate how the whole point of the episode is Riker seeing this from an outsider's perspective. And I was reading some of the thoughts on it, and they were thinking about how this is usually, like, TV and movies and whatnot, particularly up to this era in the late 80s, portrayed black people, African Americans, as sort of the odd one out, as the one black person in a group of white people, and saying that they would like to flip that on its head and be like, well, what's it like to be a white person in Harlem? And so they noted that, like, Worf is kind of like that. That Worf was the one singular Klingon on a human ship, so they want to flip that on its head and show a human on a ship of Klingons, and how Worf kind of felt really out of place in those. So they're making Riker go out of his comfort zone. He's the one who's out of place in a different culture. So, and I do appreciate it for that. I think it had a lot to say about appreciating other cultures, getting to learn them, know more about them. Like, he showed a lot more appreciation towards Worf. In fact, going forward, Worf and Riker were always a lot closer. They had a closer friendship and bond. Although it kind of started a bit earlier this season with the Where Silence Has Lease episode, where Riker already showed interest in Klingon culture by going in and doing Worf's calisthenic programs with him. But here, I think after this episode is where they really start to bond more and have more of an appreciation for each other. And plus, you see Riker bonding with the character of Clag, the second officer, which was a really nice character story there as well, which I do appreciate. Now, I do have to talk a little bit about Clag. He was played by this actor who appeared in Star Trek several times and other science fiction. I know him as the Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalike. I always thought he was very similar to Arnold Schwarzenegger. In fact, he actually appeared in the movie The Terminator, where he played one of the punks that he beat up. But he also appeared in other Star Trek episodes, particularly the Deep Space Nine one. I think it's called Rules of Acquisition, where Quark went off to the Gamma Quadrant. And I think he appeared in a couple other Star Trek episodes too, but he's also most known by sci-fi fans for playing this reoccurring villain in The X-Files, who was like this big muscular henchman alien guy that often attacked, had to fight Mulder or whatever. And of course, there were several of these alien clones or whatever that all looked like him, so he played them all. Anyway, I didn't learn this guy's name, but anyway, but this is kind of the most kind of acting that I've actually seen from him, because he actually does a good job playing some of these emotional dialogue scenes as Clag. So I did appreciate that. But here's the thing. So it had some good character building moments. It had a really good, extremely good culture building, particularly for the Klingons. Like this episode is a huge step in establishing the culture for the Klingons. But the plot of this episode is kind of ridiculous. And also they have a side plot, which I absolutely can't stand. But let me talk about the plot of this episode first. So the episode starts out okay with the captain being like, "Where do your loyalties lie?" Blah blah. But then it gets ridiculous when it gets to the part where they find that little thingy on the ship, that mold or whatever the fuck it is that's destroying the ship, the algae or whatever, and he becomes extremely obtuse. He's like, "Oh, the Enterprise definitely did it. That's them. They destroyed it. So I'm not even." And when Picard sends a message like, "Hey, we found this algae thingy. Here's how you get rid of it." He's like, "No, I don't believe them. They're lying. Let's attack them." And it's like, I don't buy that the alliance between the Klingon Empire and the Federation would last 60 plus years if this is how most Klingon captains reacted to what was very clearly like just some bullshit and very clearly not the Enterprise's fault. And even though Riker tries to very clearly tell them this over and over again, he's like, "No, I don't listen to you, blah blah blah, I'm going to destroy the Enterprise." Blah. Like, there was a book, like one of these non-canon books, that had Riker reunited with Clag, which I really liked, because it was actually about Worf and Clag going off on a mission, but he met up with Riker, and they had some drinks together and reminisced. And I think Clag was the captain of that. Anyway, maybe Worf didn't even go with them. Maybe it was just the book was just about Clag being the captain of the ship. Well, regardless, they talked about this Korgon, I think his name is, the captain, and they talked about how he was I think if not killed, then kicked out of the Klingon military for being incompetent. Because that's how the book series sort of covered for this episode, because clearly he was a very incompetent captain and was an idiot, like to the point where and this, to me, this was artificially done in order to create tension. You had to have some, tension or suspense in this episode, so let's have this captain be incredibly obtuse and think that that the Enterprise would sabotage the ship and was trying to destroy them, when very fucking clearly it wasn't. And then of course Riker beamed them over the ship, and he's like, "Oh!" and started attacking, and this is the way he expected Riker to destroy the Enterprise on his behalf. It's like, why would he do that? I don't know. So the plot, that whole plot, I think, is a wash, which is what I have against this episode. So I guess now I'll get into the subplot, which is also, as I said, I hated the subplot of this episode. That's when I introduced Mindon, who's a Benzite, as an exchange officer on the Enterprise, and I think Picard and Worf treat him like shit in this episode for no good reason. Like, they try to make him act all arrogant so they could point out the differences between the Benzite and Starfleet, and how he's not used to operating in the Starfleet way, and how he finds the algae, but he keeps it to himself because that's the standard Benzite operating thing. And Picard even admits to him later that, you know what, that's our fault because we didn't tell you that, which also means that the training program they had for exchange officers sucked because they didn't make him aware of the most basic Starfleet regulations. But barring that, Picard's like, you know what, it's our fault. We didn't tell you the proper way to do it, so we're telling you now, so just make sure to do that in the future. Problem is, the way that Picard, treats him is and him and Worf, and other people keep, shooting themselves, giving themselves looks like, you see this fuckhead over here? What a moron. And Worf himself would, for no reason, starts antagonizing him and being like, when he said to Picard, it's like, oh, I was just trying to impress upon you this importance. And he's like, no worries, you can just talk to Worf. And Worf comes up to him all pissed, like, now you can impress me. And I'm like, why are you being such a dick to him, Worf? Worf is coming off as a very bad sort of superior officer. Now, granted, this guy is acting really arrogant in this episode. It's like, I know these regulations, I can improve the ship. But he doesn't deserve to be treated like an idiot, and Worf to physically intimidate him for no good reason. I like portrayals of Worf in future seasons that show him as a good sort of, because he's a department head, so he has a team, he has a whole bunch of people, all the security officers are under him, so he's basically their captain, he's their chief, he's who they report to, so he controls teams of people, which is not something we actually see very much. Most of this occurs off screen. In fact, I'm thinking of the one episode where we do see Worf conferring with his security officers. I'm thinking of the episode The Drumhead. They're meeting in the conference room, and doesn't Worf have a security office where he can meet with this, because the Forge has engineering to meet with his engineering staff. It seems to make sense that he would have his own office and not have to go to the conference room, but whatever. Regardless of that, I'm thinking of the episode Lower Decks, the episode, not the show, in the 7th season, where Worf is looking after Sito and is thinks of her as one of his officers, and he wants to see her succeed, and he tries to teach her the value of standing up to Picard or whatever, and that shows him as a really good, a very helpful, very competent commanding officer, or what is, which, and I think that's a way better portrayal of him rather than here. He's just being a dick for no reason. He's like, no, you can impress me, Ensign Mendon. And this is the way he's like being a dick to Mendon the whole time. It's like, I don't know. That side plot just really, really annoyed me, and especially it's not just Worf. Like everyone's kind of like Picard's like every time he speaks, Picard's like, I guess why don't you just leave me the fuck alone? Like why would you act like this? And Picard even when the guy like came to Picard with like important information, he was like, oh yeah, whatever, thanks. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I think that Picard and Worf and some of the other officers in this episode are kind of acting like dicks. And why the hell does the Mendon guy look exactly like the other Benzite that appeared in it? I think it's played by the same actor. But he looks exactly like the one that appeared in the previous episode, and Wesley actually mistakes him for him at first. Mordok, I think. And he's like, oh, I am not Mordok. Yeah, all of a sudden, I am Mendon. We just have the same genetic makeup, or we're from the same geostructure, whatever the fuck he said. And like, why? Why would just get another actor and make the makeup look different? Why would you do this? This seems a complete waste of time. I don't know. So that side plot is actually very frustrating for me to watch. That's why I don't like watching that episode. I was, in fact, very tempted to just skip through those scenes. But then I still have to deal with the Korgon acting like a complete competent moron. But still, you still get great character beats, you still get Riker being clever, and you still get like a lot of culture building for the clans. So, not a bad episode overall. So my rating for Matter of Honor out of 10, it's going to be a 6 good. As I said, great with the character stories, great with the culture building, but pretty terrible at the side plot, which is just horrible, and it does horrible things to our main characters. And the main plot it doesn't make any sense why the Klingon captain would act like such an obtuse moron for no reason, just to artificially create tension. So 6 out of 10 for this episode. So that's it for my review of A Matter of Honor. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek videos, covering all sorts of Star Trek, including the current Star Trek show airing Picard, as well as other shows like Star Wars, The Clone Wars, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.